The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And today we're going to talk about how to heal after a traumatic incident. Now, I have these conversations with my wife when she asks me things like, what do you think the cause of XYZ is? And in my old age, I have found out, and I've lived this, that there usually isn't just one cause and effect. Usually there's multiple causes to an issue and multiple effects to an issue, just like there's multiple ways to solve problems. So today I have the Mindfulness mentor, and I don't just have her on because she's also a mentor, just like me. This is Ray Luskin. And Ray, you don't know this, but a large number of my family, for some reason, uses your first name as their middle name. So
wow, that is cool.
There is all sorts of people.
When I was born, there weren't a lot of Rays at all. And I have to tell you, when I was 18, I got a draft notice. That's how few there were.
Wait, you got a draft notice?
I did at 18. Yep.
Wow.
So I had to go prove that I was a female.
That's the first time I've ever heard of something like that. So
it was really bizarre.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, so we started the conversation. Why don't you tell everyone about your background, your origin story? Ray does a lot with art and healing, creativity, and expression. So, Ray, take it away.
Okay. So I just want to share that for me, art was always a big part of my life. And I got my first award when I was 7 years old, and I got to hang a picture at the Marshall Field department store in Chicago, and that was a big deal. And the Tribune came and took a picture of me with my teacher, and it was really cool. So I'd always loved art. And then my grandfather, who was an artist, it wasn't his full-time gig, but he was an artist. He said, I want you to come to my studio and I'll teach you to paint. Because I was 7, I was into drawing at that point. So I went with him, and I didn't know at the time that he had a problem. I was sexually abused from age 7 to 13. Now, at 7, I didn't know anything, and I thought, I told my parents, Gramps gave me a chest rub today, and they just laughed, things like that. And, it was a little weird. And, obviously by the time I was 13, I knew this wasn't right. So I ended up, how it ended is he went and he took a paintbrush. Now, this is right after John Kennedy died, and, and I was painting a picture of John saluting his dad as the casket went by. And my grandfather started to take a brush and touch my painting. And I said, don't you ever touch my painting again. And he never touched me again. You have to remember, at that point, there were no after-school specials. There was no internet. And anything that stays here stays in the family. You never discussed anything. So I kept the secret for a really, really, really long time. I didn't tell anybody until I was in my 20s what had been really going on. And, I finally went into traditional talk therapy. And I have to tell one quick story, just because it sets the tone why art is so important to me personally and for healing. When I went to college, I was always still wanted to do art, Ray, Rembrandt, and Rubens. And when I got to college, my first class, I go into class, and the teacher, has this guy come in with a cape, and he just whips it open, and he's naked. And I froze. I was having a flashback, but I didn't know what that was at the time. And he told me, get out of my classroom. You're a horrible artist. You're worthless. And I believed him, and I didn't pay for 12 years. So that's sort of the story, the backstory. So when I was, in my healing process, I eventually found a therapist who did say, I think you need to draw. You need to paint. You need to tell your story in a different way. And so little by little, I did that, and I used art for healing. But my biggest breakthrough came when I was 35 years old. At this point, I had 2 little kids, and I had crayons around me all the time. And one day, I just took up a crayon, and I just started scribbling. I mean, raw, red, marks and black marks on these paper. And it was just like all the anger and rage that I've been carrying and all the guilt and shame was on the paper. And I kept doing this. And it could have been 10 minutes or an hour. But the change in me, it was like I could breathe for the first time. I could really relax. And so that is how it really came to be, because I worked with many people over the years just with simple tool of scribble and doodle. It can make such a difference. I didn't understand at that moment there's a somatic response that we carry trauma in ourselves, and it has to have a way to come out. And this was my way to come out. And so that was really the beginning of me using this as a tool, because I didn't know it was possible. I didn't know art therapy. I didn't know any of the tools that were out there. And it led me on a journey of, self-healing. And I became a self-help junkie is what I say. So.
Very good. One of the things, obviously it's a horrendous story and you've come out on top and you're very, very successful. And one of the things I just kind of want to touch on is how here you were in an art class and the teacher said, you'll never be an artist, or whatever the words were. I'm paraphrasing. I had a similar experience. I went back to a university to get a degree in education, and I wrote a paper on, and it was total farce, and it was intended to be satire, but the professor didn't have a sense of humor. So the assignment was, write a paper on why you want to be a teacher. And I went into the 3 best things about teaching are June, July, and August. And, my mom was a teacher. So all of the jokes I put in this, and it was well written, but she basically failed it. And she said, you should never be a teacher. And literally a month later, that same university hired me to teach. So
I love it.
Revenge is sweet
story.
Sometimes. And revenge, when I say that, I mean, you get revenge on people that poo-poo you when you're successful in spite of them. So I love the fact that, I'm very sorry that you had to go through horrible, horrible trauma, but the fact that you were able to overcome it is what I want to focus on today.
I love that. I have to just tell you, so I call it, I had the triple whammy. So I had a teacher in high school tell me I was a terrible writer as well. So thank God I didn't listen. I've written 4 books and one is an award winner. So, I didn't listen to him either. And the other one was the choir teacher said, would you please mouth the words?
They would have said that to me.
That was a little hard because I do love singing. But I have to tell you, in public, I was doing a talk once, and I actually got on stage and I sang Itsy Bitsy Spider in a sexy, sultry voice in front of 500 people. So, you can overcome anything. Right. So why don't you mentioned the 4 books you wrote? I'm familiar with the one, Art for My Heart. Can you tell everyone about the books, what they're about, and where someone might be able to obtain them? Oh, thank you. Well, Art for My Heart was a self-discovery journal for kids, basically, from 9 to 11. Within it, there was always an activity to be done with the family. So what was interesting, I believe in process over product. So mine were it wasn't about being a great artist. It was about, there was a section about body awareness. 50 things you love about your body and yourself. There was a section on mandalas and giving back and things like that. So these were always my core values, and so that was in the book. And that book is available as a PDF right now. And then the second book.
Where is it available?
Oh, it's at Ray. 3 of them are on my website, rayluskin.com. Okay, and the other one that I'll get to, The Creative Activist, is actually on Amazon.
Okay, so let me spell out your website for the listeners. Ray is R-A-E, Luskin, Luskin.com. So people that aren't familiar with the female name Ray might spell it like the one in Star Wars, which that's not what it is. It's R-A-E, Luskin. So please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that was perfectly fine. So the next one I wrote, and that was, when I finished that, when I did, Art for My Heart, I had been teaching for a while. I had my own art school called Art and Soul Connections, and I did that for like 10 years, and the book was the culmination of that. And then I said, okay, I need to wait for a whisper. I truly believe in the power that little voice within. What am I supposed to do next? And I heard this voice interview 100 people. I'm like, oh no. Because I had tried to write a book many, many years ago. And that was my first book that I didn't publish, called Survivor to Thriver. And at the time, it was the original, before they ever did memoirs on all this kind of stuff. This was it. And it was not your typical story, because I used vignettes and my art and all the things that people weren't doing at the time. And I didn't end up writing. I had taken it to the premier teachers at the time, Jean Chinabola, there were some others at the time, Larry Dossi, and I was giving it to them to look at, and they kept saying, your story is not enough. You need other people. So I have a master's in urban planning, so I knew how to write a questionnaire. So I sent it out. I got 150 responses, again, pre-computer, so you hand tabulated everything. And every time I went to write that book, I couldn't. I mean, I felt like an imposter who would, who would want to read a book of mine? I had all these negative voices. So I was hesitant when this voice said, you need to interview 100 people. But I did it anyway. And I started, and I thought it was going to be called The Winning Adventure. And it turned out I wrote The Creative Activist, Make the World Better, One Person, One Action Time. It spoke to my heart. I had one coach say to me, what book could you, because I was writing 3 books at once, basically, because I'm a creative and I do a lot of multitasking. So it was very interesting for me. So I picked the pony and wrote it. And I said, I'll do The Creative Activist, because I could speak to that. It was in my heart. So that book is it's got 36 stories of people who've made a difference in the world. And each one has 3 personal development questions and 1 take action step. And I think the hardest part about writing that book was including me in the story. And that's the editors kept saying, where are you? So I put myself in the action section, talking about how I had been a volunteer, or I did this project or that project. It was a labor of love. It has been something, I've interviewed over 200 people myself, and each story, I believe we all have a story. We all have something important to share, to give, to make a difference. And we need to bear witness to other people's stories, learn to make a safe place for them to be seen, heard, and understood. And I believe that is how we connect as humans, and that is how we can change the world, is by telling these stories. And it doesn't have to be one of major trauma. It could be just something, what would you tell your younger self today? What would you tell your younger self today? I'm curious, Marcus.
Oh, I would tell my younger self to stop studying criminal justice, or study it also, but take some business classes. Because now I'm in business, and it was trial by error for the first 5 or 6 years.
Got it. So, that's the story that somebody else needs to hear. There's going to be somebody right now in college who's saying, I really hate this. I'm doing it for my parents. I don't want to be here. I want to be doing this. And they're scared to do it because we're so conditioned to listen to the voices outside of ourselves and ourselves. And so I believe, my sharing this is like a ripple effect. So I had some incredible people in my book, and stories that were just people I'd met along the way, some I reached out to. And, part of the creative activist is really about, what can I say? It's taking the time to lead and live your legacy now. That's one of my biggest messages. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed and say, God, I wish I had done that. You want something different, so do it now. The other piece of it is about being creative. It's about connecting with people and collaborating and how important it is. And, that's what I want to share with the people. You can cultivate your courage. We all have courage. We may not always feel brave, but my biggest mantra was feel the fear and do it anyway. And I did. And I met incredible people. One of the people I actually met was a woman who at another event, a women's event, and she was a speaker. I said, oh my God, I've got to interview you. Well, she was a college graduate, not somebody you'd expect to go to prison, but she and her husband embezzled and ended up in prison. And when she went, she had like stage 3 cancer. And so, breast cancer. And so she had surgery in the prison, and all this stuff was going on. And, she had a very young roommate, and her young roommate died because the prison did not believe her when she said, I'm sick. And if they'd done a blood test, they would have found that she really was sick. So she became an activist in prison. She started and this was in Arizona, and she started the first cancer walk in a prison yard, and then when she got out, she did some amazing things, and she started a foundation to honor this girl who had been, her roommate. And she ended up, I saw this and it was like the most powerful thing. She ended up sitting with Michelle Obama during the State of the Union address at one point, because she then became an advocate on this big level, and that's the kind of stuff I want to tell people. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you've been, who you are. You can impact one person or you can impact millions. You have a story and you need to share it.
As I'm listening to you, Ray, believe it or not, I think you and I are, belief-wise, cut from the same cloth or a similar one. It's very interesting to me. I noticed that when you were talking, you talked about you have a bachelor's in fine arts, and that makes perfect sense. And my perception of you is you're completely engulfed, and I don't mean that in a bad way, in the world of art, which is great. Totally immersed. And then you mentioned you have a master's in urban planning. So what's the connection there? Why pursue it? It seems way vastly different.
Well, it really started because when I was taking classes to finish up my degree in art history and stuff, I took a class on people like Buckminster Fuller. And all of a sudden I started getting interested in urban planning and what could that look like and what would make a change so we could create a better world. So I guess I've always been interested in creating a better world, and that's what happened. That was the beginning of wanting to do that and find out how can I make a difference in the day-to-day lives of people. My master's thesis actually was at this is before Lurie's was downtown, but it was the Children's Hospital over on Lincoln and near Hofstad, their intersection.
I managed the security department there in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with it.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
And so, the Children's Hospital, I went to interview them. I interviewed the neighborhood. I interviewed the staff and find out what their vision was. And they said, we can't grow where we are today. We want to be a world-class hospital. We want to do this and this research and do all these things. And so in my thesis, I said they're going to have to leave this neighborhood and find something else. So when they actually moved down by, what's called Passman, Northwestern Hospital, and that's where they are now, I was like, wow, this is so cool. So it was sort of nice to have that happen. That's always been my area. I want to make a difference. And I've cared about the health and well-being of children and families throughout my life.
Awesome. So can you talk about what are your favorite mediums to work in as far as artistic expression, not only for yourself, but for the people who you interact with?
Okay. So for myself, I love to do mixed media pieces. I'll paint, I'll add fabric, I'll add glitter and glue, I will use markers, watercolors, so everything is mixed media. And my pieces, when I start, these are what I call where I am today, not my healing pieces, which you again could go to Ray Luskin and see those. I want to bring joy to people. I call myself a colorist. And so it's about texture and color and beauty and syncing it up with nature, because that's where I find so much peace and joy, and that's where I connect with my God, my spirit. And so that, and the other medium that I use all the time is photography. And I'm not talking about taking out the old camera, the big one with the, SLR, which I used to have. I just take my cell phone these days, and I will go all over, and I get up at least twice a week and go watch the sunrise at the beach. And it is glorious. And I take time every day to go outside nature. And I take photographs, and I've been sharing them on Facebook ever since I started with Facebook. So those are the places that I share mostly. Now, I play with art, and I like to try things. I did a week-long program in glass blowing at Ringling School of Design in Florida. I've done printmaking at another group, school, that kind of thing. And I always try and explore different mediums. So, yeah. And for other people, it's really simple. Again, anybody can draw a heart, or they can cut one out of paper. It's very simple. It's about making collages a lot of times when I work with other people. I do something called vision boards, where I'm having people explore what is it they would love in their life. And it's a combination of cutting out images. And today you can use Canva if you're real computer literate, or you can just go get Google and, download Pinterest pictures or things like that, cut them out and paste them on a board. So I use that as a healing tool for many people. And the scribbles and doodles piece I do is a hallmark of my work. So so many people spend time, I'm not an artist, I can't do this. Well, I'm not asking you to be an artist. I'm asking you to have the courage to play, explore, and experiment. That's it. You don't need anything more. And when I do this in a classroom with people, I have them hold down, they pick a color that they want to use. It could be markers or crayons. And I have them hold it in their non-dominant hand, hold the paper with their dominant hand, and close their eyes. And I just say, scribble. I said, how can you do it wrong? You're not using your dominant hand and you're not looking. So there is no right or wrong. And I try and tell people there's no judgment. Anything we do with creativity and art, and I do this with my grandchildren all the time, is perfectly imperfect. And it's an opportunity to try something new. So if that didn't work, what else would you try? And I think that's a lesson for life that we all need. It opens up your creativity. It opens up your problem solving and solutions, to things that you wouldn't think about. If we do it, I think it was Einstein said, if we do it the same way we've always done it, we'll get the same results.
That's true.
And I believe we have to be, as a society, as a people, and as individuals, open to new possibilities. Set that growth mindset.
So very interesting. You don't know this, but a couple of things. I'm a big believer in being creative, and I am not. My art would not win any awards, but my ideas would and did. One of the things that I've done for creativity, and it was really a sense of pride, is I took a multi-pocket vest and I turned it into a diaper bag, so a dad didn't have to carry a purse.
Love that.
So I did that. It ran its course, but I'm a big believer. There's a lot of, forgive the expression, endorphins released when you create something. And it doesn't have to be art, but when you create something, even when you're a parent and you create a child, there's this sense of pride. And the other thing is, art actually taught me how to read.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely, they say there's a big correlation for literacy. And that's why I've always promoted you got to keep the arts in the school,
absolutely.
And music as well as visual art.
So
those are important skills, and they say kids learn to learn better, through those.
So here I'm in kindergarten, and the teacher thought I was odd. Well, everyone thinks I'm odd. No, I'm kidding. The teacher thought I was odd because I would only use the crayons with paper on them. And turns out I was tested and I was colorblind. And when I was doing color by number, I was reading the crayon, yellow, red, blue. And I taught myself how to read through doing art, wanting to do it the right way.
Wow, so that's a cool story. My son is colorblind.
Ah, okay.
He didn't pick that one up, though.
Very good, very good. So how do you help people right now? What can people do to learn from you, to be mentored by you? What's that process like?
Well, I have something on my website, if you go there, and I have 4 pillars of work that I work in, and they overlap, but you can break it down. One is creative visioning, which I mentioned before, and it's about imagining the life you would love. We all have that, and too often we get stuck in circumstances. Well, I've always done it this way, or, my parents wouldn't approve, my partner wouldn't say I could do that, all these things. And I want people to get out of that mindset and learn to dream big, ask powerful questions. What would I love? What can I do with what I have? Think about Apollo 13? What could they do with what they had to come back safely? Those are powerful questions. And that's what I want us to apply to our own lives, the visions we have for our family, for the world. So that is one piece. And I do a visioning session with people. I take about 2 hours to do an individual one. And I would say that is the biggest way to get going with me. And then we have a real conversation about what then may be holding you back, because we all have these beliefs, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. I it's selfish to want money, or it's selfish to be in self-care. And so then I go into a mindfulness piece, a pillar about mindfulness. We talk about how do we change belief? How do we change those negative voices in our head? The one that said, I couldn't be a writer, or you couldn't, you weren't, creative enough, or whatever it is. And so I work with people on their mindset, and that comes through it also in being present. I think mindfulness, people think, meditation, I can't sit there and, and just be quiet. I'm not asking you to do that. That may be a piece of it, but it's learning to be present in our lives and being observant. You teach about, when you're, shooter stuff, at the school, how do you be observant? How do you notice when somebody is, maybe suspect? So we have to teach ourselves curiosity and observation skills. And I think that's what I focus in on mindfulness, is we have to be present in our lives and present every day to our surroundings. And that's a safety issue for all of us, whether you're on a college campus, a woman getting out of her car late at night, anybody, being confronted in an unsafe space.
So you're saying that mindfulness is being present in the moment. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mindfulness is being present in the moment for me. Now, there are other definitions of mindfulness, but I use this one, and I think it serves me well, and I think it serves other people well, and it gives us that opportunity to know what we're feeling, whether it's in our body, so we learn to take better care of ourselves. Okay, if I eat that really doesn't agree with me. But if we're always just pushing and then we take an antacid, we may be doing more harm than good, because we're not taking the time to notice what we're noticing about our lives, about our bodies, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of techniques I use. I do meditation. One of the big ones I have is a gratitude journal. I implore people to get one. And you can break it down, and to, even just 3 gratitudes every morning can make a difference. Because what you focus on is what you become. Our thoughts create our emotions, I believe, and our emotions then create our actions, and that creates our results. So if we're always in this, this is horrible, my life is horrible, well, what do you think you're going to attract? Horrible.
Very good, very good. We're going to take a little break. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.